already had your lunch, I'm sure, because that happened.
I have. You have
3 hours ago.
Banana.
We were out of blueberries, but I'm noticing this pattern of dried mango continuing to be. And I was like scrambling to find something, so it's like dried mango and one of Jen's homemade chocolate chip cocoa infused, hot chocolate infused cookies.
Love it.
This is not the best diet, but
I like it. It's like a dessert lunch, a healthy dessert lunch.
Yeah, a little bit. There's some fiber in here.
Yeah,
I call that healthy. I want to go to the pool later on today, so I'm going to try to get a swim in. I need at least like something to go on. I can't just intermittent fast my way through the day. So I mentioned we may have a visitor show up.
Very exciting visitor for the moment, especially. Yeah.
And let's check. And I think it sounded like he's kind of busy because I think the world is, he's crazy.
Yeah.
What's that?
Especially his world.
Yeah. His world is crazy. The whole world is crazy, and then his world is particularly, a crazy version of that.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun. We can get to hear some of that story. And then, here's Max. Is Max here to talk GME, and does he have ideas on it?
I told him about it. Do you remember that he actually had known about David McDonough before? So in Legion's town hall, because he was a big squash player too, apparently.
Oh, right. Yep. Did you tell him?
Yeah.
You revealed our surprise already?
I revealed the surprise. I was too excited about it.
Did you tell him? Did you tell Max that that's our surprise?
Yeah.
Cool.
But we don't know when, so that'll still be a surprise.
There's still the question of if, because he sounds like he's a little bit of the man of the hour, kind of,
Yeah.
Pretty busy.
Oh, Assad's here too. There were a couple people in Reddit talking about this on a thread.
Hey, Max.
Hey.
How are we?
Good. I want to hear
how you doing?
about this, the events of the last 48 hours.
Get on the record here.
No financial advice, right?
Dig this up when you're a hedge fund manager.
I don't know about that. We'll see. It's the craziest thing I've seen, I guess, in my short time on this planet. I just finished, actually, this week, I finished reading a book that one of my mentors suggested that I read, which is called Reminiscence of a Stock Operator by Jesse Livermore. And that book is a journal of this fellow who traded in stocks and in commodities in the 1920s and around that time. And the last two chapters were devoted to railroad cornering and some of the big barons of that era, like J.P. Morgan, and Jim Keane was mentioned in there. And it was a fantastic book. And I think a lot of the same things that we're seeing now, we have seen previously, just we weren't alive then. So it's interesting to see how technology has, and has played such a large role in that as well. I mean, you used to have, for example, in this book, they talked about bucket shops, which used to be the places where people used to go and trade. And, we used to have, only one or two exchanges, right, that you can, trade on. Now with, technology, anybody can put up an exchange, right? So I think that it's just complicated, and I'd like to see, I think Elizabeth Warren is coming on CNBC later today, and I think that's going to be a fantastic watch.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
What's she supposedly gonna, do you have any kind of visibility into what she might say or kind of what position she might take?
I don't know. I have no idea. I think, just based on past times that she's been on and basically what her MO is. I think, she was very involved in Mishti. You can correct me if I'm wrong here. Was very involved with the Consumer Protection, Bureau, making sure that, people are shielded from, the financial services industry, I guess, or other consumer protection regulation. And I think that she's just going to talk about that. So,
yeah, definitely super interesting. Oh, DK shared the Ted Cruz tweet too. Did you see AOC's response? She was basically like, you just tried to get me murdered 3 weeks ago, so I'm not interested in working with you, Ted. Anyone else in the GOP want to protect retail investors? Like,
I see. Right. I didn't follow the whole thing. I just thought it was interesting that this is such a galvanizing moment that people who would normally be so at odds with each other are kind of more, kind of aligned, like almost it's easy to get everybody to agree that there's something amiss here, which is pretty rare.
Yeah, I think someone said that this has done a better job than Biden of unifying the country, which I thought
Oh my God.
Right.
But I'll be listening in and excited to hear what David has to say later on.
Oh my God, yeah. It's so funny how these, like, he could never have anticipated this moment happening, but I'm sure so much of what he's been working on for years, now it's just like popping off. It reminds me of when Signal had like the big moment, which started a couple of weeks ago with the whole WhatsApp announcement. Like couldn't have predicted when that would happen, but
definitely, it's Wild West out here.
Yeah.
Was Assad?
He actually got a call, so he might jump back.
He did. Okay.
He was telling me. Did Max?
I noticed that his. Yeah, it looks like Max dropped. I re-invited him, and it looks like Assad is. I don't have a control to invite him, so I wonder if, even if now's not the right time, I wonder if there may be a bug that we should. Do you remember? I had this with Ashwin earlier today. I took a screenshot of this situation. I'm just sending you on Slack right now.
He might have had to jump off before you tried to invite him. I'm not sure.
Oh, I thought I saw him. It could be. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we can ask him. Also, did you see AOC tweeted that she is going to be on Twitch at 8:30 p.m. tonight to discuss GameStop and retail trading?
Wow. Is she doing it in the context of Among Us, or this is?
I don't think so.
More of a kind of a topic focus.
I don't think Among Us. I think maybe she's just like using it as a live stream platform.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that Justin Kahn, he tweeted about this and he was particularly outraged. So it's only fitting that she's going to jump on Twitch.
Oh, interesting. Wow. Class action lawsuit filed in New York against Robinhood.
It has been filed?
Yeah.
I thought this, speaking of Justin, I thought this was an interesting one. So this is...
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
2 hours ago, Justin Kahn said, just got a tip that Citadel reloaded their shorts before they told Robinhood to stop trading GME. If this is true, Ken Griffin and the Robinhood founder should be in jail. This is class warfare.
Yeah. / what does that mean? Told Robinhood to stop trading GME? There were some tweets about other, like, I don't know how true these are, but other like Robinhood whistleblower reports coming out.
But actually, I think the
other one as well.
Which one?
This one.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So I separately, so I wish I could share it here, but it's an image that was shared to me in a private signal, but it's like a chart that shows the total payments of Robinhood from trading firms for routing orders first half of 2020. And Citadel Securities is by far the largest, and it looks like it's in the range of like about $125 million. And so I don't, it could be
Wait, what was the
something.
first one?
So there's an image that was shared. I can't link to it, but it says the total payments to Robinhood from trading firms for routing orders. So this is, I think, like, people buy order flow off of Robinhood,
Mm-hmm.
and Citadel Securities is the largest customer of the order flow. And it looks like it's much larger than the second is Susquehanna. The first, being Citadel, is about 125 million for the first half of 2020, which suggests, if it's growing, that's like a $250 million a year, annualized customer. If it's not growing,
Mm-hmm.
if it is growing, it's more than that. So it's like
Yeah.
a huge, Citadel represents a huge portion probably of Robinhood revenue.
Yeah. Definitely. That's an interesting kind of conflict of
And
interest.
so it's a conflict. And if Citadel is basically saying you have to stop trading, or either like we will stop buying your order flow, or
Yeah.
whatever, they have a lot of leverage, obviously. And if Citadel is reloading their shorts before they tell Robinhood this, that is pretty obviously market manipulation, right?
Seems like it, right?
They're basically saying, like, we're going to take a position, then we're going to force your hand to do something because of our other financial interests, and then we're going to profit from the action. I mean, that's material non-public information, right?
Yeah.
It's funny because we started talking about this concept yesterday as like, what is, what are efficient markets and what is market integrity? And like, I feel like even just in the last day, I feel like nice, Linda.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I am seeing all of this about like decentralized finance now, which I don't know enough to talk about it right now, but it's an interesting kind of like moment that I feel like a lot of people will start thinking and looking more seriously at that.
Yeah, I think it is a moment. I'm only very tangentially connected, to some of the people working in that, and so I have a little bit of flavor of it, but I'm not super deep. And I think a lot of the topics make sense, but I worry that decentralized value, in a sense, is easy for me to understand because value is purely an agreed upon thing, and it doesn't really require any other kind of mechanical, operational execution, human decisions. It's just an agreement. And anything in finance, like if you were to trade a security, like GME, if you're doing that in a trust minimized way, and there's no regulators or regulation possible, then you also kind of, I think, expose yourself to the risks that the people who operate GME and who report on earnings, and it's sort of like there's still this situation you get into that requires a certain amount of trust, and it's still kind of a trust in humans to do the right thing and to operate and report in the right way. And so, in a sense, it feels to me like it may kind of shift the trust point, but doesn't really eliminate the kind of trust that it would seek to.
Shift the trust point onto whom?
So I think today everybody's frustrated with Citadel and with the NASDAQ and with Robinhood and with, there's a lot of people that we trust in the kind of existing financial system to execute the trades, to make the markets efficient, to make the market, the SEC helps try to, add market integrity forces. And so there's a lot of trust in human decision-making that exists in the system. I think DeFi seeks to minimize the trust in those human institutions. I think that idea works if it's just a pure value store. I get how that all hangs together because there's nothing else operational about it that requires human trust. It just requires human belief. But as soon as you start trading GME as an example, some sort of security on a trust minimized trading infrastructure, you have moved your kind of gatekeepers and control points and kind of risk from the people who run the NASDAQ and the people who run Citadel and the people who run Robinhood to the people who run GameStop. But I'm not saying they're better actors or worse actors, but it feels like it shifts where human trust lives, but it still is pretty dependent on, you sort of shift the way power works and the way decision-making works, but I'm not sure that you fix the problem in a deep way.
Yeah. What do you think are the biggest kind of risk points or downsides if the shift were to happen?
Well, I think, you'd find some people who take advantage of, if, let's say, the board of directors of GameStop, I don't know if they're good people or bad people, or they're, I don't want to make a judgment on that. I don't know them. I don't have any real opinion. But I think you do shift the trust to them. And if they're operating in an environment where there's no regulation or checks, or there's no kind of societal input on how we want these things to function, then, you'd hope they're good people, but they could abuse their power. So that's the thing that I worry about. I haven't heard in DeFi. I think I've heard, the concept of DeFi is attractive. And I think the kinds of players that it would remove from power or kind of dissipate some of the power of, I think it's, I think those ideas I can find attractive. But I don't believe that there's yet a recognition of the fact that it actually shifts the power to other people who, and some of which will be, good actors, but some of which are probably as corruptible as the people who run Citadel and Robinhood and any of these entities. Yeah. But I'm not fully convinced that we can just, wave magic wand, decentralized finance, and everything is finally fixed. I think
power to the plebs, not that simple. Yeah.
I think there's we've talked about this before, but anytime you have the chance to decentralize decision making and authority and power, I think it actually is, better for humanity to have more decentralization than less. But the paths that we kind of choose to take to get there and sort of the specific problems that we're addressing with each step, are, maybe more informed by our recency bias of what has been most frustrating. In a sense, that's sort of the way history plays out, right? It's just whatever ignites a movement, because it's kind of a hot button issue, ends up getting a bunch of attention, and that's sort of where we collectively allocate resources and attention to try to solve problems.
Yeah.
I see Max is back. I haven't seen this. I was just shared a link in private, but it's a Twitter link. So let me see. Okay, it's a It's a
WSB chairman. They want you to think your vote is the name you write on a ballot, but it's actually the currency that you use. Huh.
So, okay.
Doge.
Shared. I'm going to share. I actually am not typically in the business of making memes. But this morning I made one, and it's actually a perfect reply to Rajat's comment. So,
What is it? Oh, I see this. Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing that we're seeing with GME is kind of, a populist revolt against gatekeepers and kind of power systems. And I think that's why it's so. That's why there's so much fervor. I think because there's a lot of frustration, and I think running up these trades and bankrupting a hedge fund is one, like, it's a moment, but in a sense it's not itself sustainable. Like, it's like, you kind of create a moment, and you can bankrupt these hedge funds, but it's not itself like a more permanent change for the world.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think that same sentiment is the kinds of things that drive people to get excited about Bitcoin, which is more of a new system for thinking about money and value.
Yeah.
Do you have any experts in trading?
Not me.
I don't trade. Certainly not an expert at much.
Would love to hear Darcy's take on all of this. That's true. He was talking about how this could be like a social plus money moment last time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Assad's back. You can invite him up if you want.
He's on a different browser. He's not invitable at the moment.
Yeah, interesting.
Oh,
I was looking at Assad's comment. I think there is an aspect of popular frustrations, but last week I would imagine the vast majority of people wouldn't know what a short squeeze is. Not that they necessarily do today.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, it's hard to piece apart like motivation and reaction and like what exactly is going on with these things that quickly become firestorms. Like, it's a really easy story to support and laugh at, and everyone's sort of like, haha, stick it to the hedge funds, but I don't know. There's probably a lot of chance and contingency involved in making this the perfect storm. Why it became a thing in the first place.
Right. And it does seem like the kind of thing where, any of these actions, have been tried, thousands of times online, and has never had that perfect storm, accumulation of like, the stone rolling down the hill and accumulating all the, the material around it.
Yeah.
So I think to say that like any internet forum can do this and manipulate stocks in any way they want is not really a good takeaway. I think it's more like, there's something else here that just worked, but I think it was a little bit more happenstance, haphazard, coincidental that this is the one that took off versus the thousands of other times it's been tried.
Yeah.
Max is asking, Mishti, with your background in endowment management, what are your thoughts here?
Oh. I was actually
checking
with my friends being like, what is the buzz right now? Like, I really wonder. I don't know. I mean, I think
in endowment management, were you working mostly on venture capital or kind of across other types of private equity, including hedge funds?
I was working mostly on like VC stuff, so I have less visibility into the hedge fund world. But I mean, some of it that I was wondering about, and I don't actually understand fully how this would work, but like a lot of the funds that are smaller and like very secretive and kind of elite and only have a small circle of investors would not be publicizing these positions in the first place at all. Mm-hmm. Do you know how did the like Wall Street Bets people first figure out that there was, what was the like initial story? Someone posted a really long tweet storm about this. Where is it?
Yeah, I didn't catch. I saw some tweet storms, but I haven't read them. But where people were kind of prosecuting all the mechanics and dynamics of how they got the ball rolling on this.
Yeah. Oh, here it was. I didn't actually read the whole thing, but I wanted to.
13F disclosures.
Yeah.
So how does that work? These were 13F disclosures were from.
Oh, we can invite us out now. Actually, we can invite anyone down there up, I think. Okay. Max might still be like partially working.
Oh, Max is okay.
Wrong.
I see Assad with the no video invite. So is he maybe on?
Is he on?
Maybe Assad is on Chrome mobile.
Yeah. I was actually really curious to ask more about the parallels between that book that Max had just read and what is playing out now. I know he's kind of like on the DL on this, but let's talk.
Oh, this end twist, Josh Gross thread. This is the one that gives the whole the deep dive backstory.
Yeah.
So many folks, especially the media, are missing the complete backstory on GME and how we got here. This has been simmering for over a year, and the story behind it is great. I've been tracking this since September and devoured all the details from the origin through today. So this is the tweet storm I was reading. Everybody's welcome to come up, but I think we've got Olivia is on no video, so I think maybe it's an unsupported device.
Oh, okay.
And Runtuck is on an unsupported device as well. I think Max is.
Yeah, FYI, like everyone just go on Chrome on desktop if you want to come up and chat. We don't support mobile right now for the video or Safari.
Okay, everybody's showing up now.
Nice. Hey.
Hey, I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah, all good.
Awesome. Sorry, I was juggling like 5 laptops, so
it's all good.
I figured that out. I think the last thing that I heard was we were talking about that 13F disclosures and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
Figure that out, or?
No, well, I just posted this kind of like tweet recap of story from start to finish, which I actually hadn't read through yet, but I was curious about how, like, who picked up on this at first and how it even, like, who got the ball rolling on Wall Street Bets, and the whole chronology of it is pretty unclear to me, but really interesting how it became such a storm, like, in the last few days.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole whole group of people who just kind of analyze this stuff, whether it's 13F disclosures or in general, like even if it's not 13F, because you have to be a certain size for 13F, I believe. The regular brokerage will give you information on what percent of the float is short for a particular security. And folks will use that to try to push a short squeeze. So a short squeeze isn't brand new to the market, and it happens all the time. I think this is kind of, I think DK mentioned this earlier, this is kind of maybe the first time you've almost weaponized, so to speak, social media to push it. And I'm not quite sure that, that's, I don't know whether it's good, bad, or ugly, right? I think the market has a place for people who have short positions. Like, there's nothing wrong with having a naked short, because you look at things like Nikola or Luckin or some of these companies who are doing bad things. And so I think shorts are needed for that. Yeah. The vast majority of shorts, like, the kinds that Bill Ackman would do in the past, where like, hey, you take a short position and then you go out and CNBC and start publishing these crappy reports about them. That might be, that may be reminiscent of this, just in a different non-social media era. But I think shorts have a place to play in the market. It's just interesting that now Reddit has weaponized folks who wouldn't even know what a short squeeze is or what exactly they're doing to this. So it's just a fascinating time to be watching all this.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, Roger just mentioned Bill Ackman on the side as well.
Yeah.
Like, what's your, also hi Olivia. We're just.
By the way, I think we have a little bug where none of our camera things are working, so we're all in this little line, and Olivia's over there. So I'm gonna try refreshing my page and see if that helps. So
okay, competence or kind of understanding of the system that you would want people to have before jumping into things like this, or is it like, is there a standard? Or, I mean, if you really take a meta view on it, it's all kind of like, what stories are people placing their belief in? And
I don't know if there's a minimum level of competence. I think we used to force a minimum level of competence when trading wasn't free, right? Not everyone could trade quickly. I think that forces just a level of professionalism. But I mean, I think this is kind of a parallel story to journalism in some sense, right? Like in the early 2000s, you needed to be someone significant to have a sexy looking website and good research and whatever. Now you can just go on Wix and buy a website that looks as good as any other. And so those signals that existed are no longer costly. And in order for a signal to be effective, it has to be costly. So that doesn't exist. I don't know what the minimum of competence is and whether there should be one, right? If we allow folks to go buy lottery tickets, right, and there's no regulation on lottery tickets, I'm not sure why this quarter should be any different.
Yeah.
But I'm just waiting for, like, Bitcoin was the rage on Twitter 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, and now no one's talking about it, right? So give it 3 weeks and we'll see what the new rage is. Maybe it's, trying to find a way to short the Robinhood IPO before it happens. So.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, DK was kind of saying something like this before. I don't know, were you here when he was sort of talking about like the changing locus of trust? I feel like that ties into what Asad is saying right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, are we going to move toward a world where we have, we sort of try to further regulate kind of markets and participants and hedge funds, or are we going to actually move to a place where those markets and financial tooling is decentralized? And if we do have more decentralization there, I think we actually push the power out to other places, which are basically the issuers of the securities that would be traded. And I think we have like very strict communication rules around that. And if the market itself is not regulated, then it seems like we'd end up pushing some of these problems, maybe a lot of these problems, to bad actors that emerge around the issuers.
Yeah, I think that's almost that's to some extent, today was decentralized. Today was almost an example of decentralization in action, right? I could go on Fidelity and I can do whatever I want with GME and, with Nokia or BlackBerry. I couldn't do that on Robinhood. I couldn't do it on DD Ameritrade. I couldn't do it on like some of the brokerages. To some extent, that was like the perfect scenario of decentralization. It's like, well, now do you have to have 40 brokerage accounts across every brokerage because you don't know who's going to allow what? And so I think decentralization is one aspect. I think to the regulation part, the thing that kind of always comes to mind is an argument that a lawyer probably would make, which I'm not a lawyer, but is the grandma thing. Like some hedge funds might just be buying this so that they can buy better yachts and better planes, but there are investment funds that are invested in hedge funds that represent pensioners and all these kind of mom and pop investors. And so who ends up holding the bag then, and should they end up holding the bag? And those are, I think, very, very complex questions of how to handle that.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of ideas on how, like, new structures that could emerge from the actions that I think sort of we collectively see something and then we try to figure out how to course correct a little bit? Like, so do you see any proposed new structures, or whether it's regulatory stuff or deregulatory stuff or government structures or private market structures that may, what kinds of things would emerge as a response to what we've seen today?
I think something that might emerge that has been kind of brewing on, again, the stoves of folks who are wonks and really into this stuff, and now it's become more an everyday matter, is the question of selling order flow. And so I think that might be something you see come out of this, where a lot of folks are going to get on board of, hey, that might not be a very good thing, including probably Robinhood and Robinhood's leadership to say, hey, crap, we might have just tanked our IPO or potential IPO by doing this, because really the only way we make money is because we sell order flow to Citadel. And so I think that might be the one place to start with low-hanging, easy thing that a lot of folks will just agree with. Okay, that's just classic, like, hey, DK wants to sell a book to Mishti for $5, and I know about that, and I'll intercept it in between and jack up the price. Right? That, I think everyone will agree on that. Maybe that's a good place to start. I don't know what other folks think, but that's where we're starting.
I've been wondering about this. So, it seems like there's a lot of I think if there were like perfect transparency around everything in the world, I think it would be fine to say, like, let's showcase that order flow could exist, and just understand the trade you're making. Like, you get, free trades, and the free is being subsidized by, selling order flow. And so you can either pay for the trade directly, or you can pay for the trade indirectly by, paying a little bit more for the access point you're getting on your bid, say. So I think that is kind of like, it feels similar to, like, advertising systems in media, right? Like, it feels like a perfect parallel in my mind. It's kind of like you're giving something for free, and there is a cost, but the cost is kind of spread and shared and hidden and not so obvious and transparent. And I think that pattern, shows up kind of everywhere in finance, particularly, and so I don't know. I'm not sure that all of finance is evil, but I do think that, like, more transparency around where fees are generated would be, helpful. And so when I think about things like you don't consider it evil finance if you have a bank account and they pay you some interest, but they actually pool your stuff and, pool your assets and with other people at a financial service institution, and they get a better interest rate on the bundle. Like, they sort of are creating that value and opportunity. And so we're kind of okay with it in that scenario, right? And then that pattern also, kind of telescopes, and you see it, like, if you hold a bunch of equities at a financial services provider, they also may use some types of, loans on those. And so just having assets under management generally, gives a financial service institution an opportunity to create things that are, free, or give you some split of a share of the value, right? Whether it's, go down to your local branch and you get a free toaster when you sign up for your account, is I think the way it worked in like the 1950s. And today it's like you get free trades, but free comes at a cost. So I think if we had like more transparency about it, like if we had something like, okay, here's how we make money, here's how it affects your economics, I think having more transparency and clarity. And then if people say, look, I don't really care about the details, give me the free thing, I think that's fine. People are empowered to make that decision. And yeah, I would just be an advocate of more transparency with something. I guess I'm not convinced that order flow is that different. Like selling order flow, I'm not convinced that it's like that different than how a lot of financial services work. So if we were to say, let's remove order flow, buying and selling, I think we're also making some pretty wholesale changes on the financial services, the whole market for financial services. It feels like it's kind of a crack in the dam. So yeah, I think, if it were clearly, we fix this one problem, then we've mostly solved these things, then I'd be a fan. But I feel like the problem exists. That same pattern replicates everywhere. And so,
correct.
Yeah, transparency. I don't know. Do you think there's a credible, reasonable way to get more transparency?
No, I mean, I don't know if there is an easy way to do that, but I 100% agree with you. I don't think the act of selling order flow itself is wrong or bad, but I think and whether this happens in the court of public perception or the court of actual law, the challenge between the optics of, hey, we generate most of our revenue by selling order flow to this one hedge fund that is an investor in this other hedge fund that's getting crushed because of the short squeeze, that can potentially get really, really hairy, especially when you go and restrict trades on those. I think I agree with you. It's almost like the ad-free model, right? Like, hey, you can pay $7.99 a month or pay $9.99 a month, and you get the ad-free model, right? So as long as there's kind of some clarity around that, and a lot of folks kind of forget this with Robinhood, especially, is that, hey, if you don't like the order flow thing because you think you're not going to get a good price, you just have to put a limit order in, right? If you put a market order in and it slips, that's because of the lag. But if you put a limit order in, it's not going to make a difference, right? Limit orders execute at the price that you limited them to.
But it's not clear that you will get your limit order filled.
Exactly.
When the price actually reaches that, they might still need the buffer to pay for the free Robinhood service.
Exactly. So, but I think there's more clarity around, hey, what could you do? Hey, if I want to go free and I'm okay with selling my order flow, hey, there's also this option that you can do the limit order. It may, again, not execute the way you wanted it to, but that's an option. So I think just more education on that would definitely be helpful.
Right. And are there, one could argue that if you don't like order flow, buying and selling, there's probably, a financial services institution that, I don't know if there's anybody who comes out and says we never do that, or we don't typically do that, or you have more of a, you pay whatever it is, $10 or $15 a trade or whatever's market these days. Yeah, I don't think paying guarantees they don't also sell your order flow, but presumably there'd be somebody who's like, keeping, maybe this would actually be an instigation for somebody to come out hard and say like, look, we never sell order flow, and you have a direct relationship with us as a financial services institution, brokerage, and you pay us your, I don't know what market is, $10, $15 a trade, and we execute it and we don't tell anybody about it ahead of time.
Yeah, I think that's
who comes out with that message. Like, is that already a common message?
I'm not sure that there is necessarily. I think it's an inferred view of, hey, we're not selling order flow. That doesn't mean they're admitting to not selling order flow, right? They're just saying we're going to be silent on the order flow matter, right? So people always make this comparison that, hey, if you're a professional, you want to go use interactive brokerage or something because their trade execution is better than Robinhood and it's faster. And I think everyone kind of just assumes that means they don't sell order flow, whether they might still sell order flow. But I think that's almost comes back to the point Mishti raised earlier around, how do you professionalize or create a barrier to professional entry? And I think the larger financial firms like Vanguard and Interactive Brokers are probably the ones you would think of as not selling order flow and having better trade execution. And the trade-off there, I think, is their user interfaces are massively clunky, almost intentionally, right? Vanguard doesn't want mom and pop retirees to go in and YOLO their options or something. And so I think it's almost intentionally clunky. So when, I think the other part of gamification, the negative aspect of gamification is, you make it so easy that you've lowered all barriers to making that mistake. But I mean, I don't know if anyone is saying they absolutely don't. But Interactive Brokers and Vanguard come to mind because they're bigger and trade execution is a lot faster.
Right. And they kind of have, they seem like they'd be the likely candidates. And does Vanguard have a traditional brokerage kind of interface in business? Okay. So they seem like, at least ideologically, they seem like a great candidate for this kind of thing, right? Just the creation of Vanguard is kind of around this idea.
Exactly.
But it does seem like, I mean, is this enough of a moment that somebody could come out now and say, look, we're going to be the transparent brokerage, and you're going to know every dollar we make and how we make it, and you're going to know every dollar you spend, and if if you're going to see all the orders that we're going to see, is that possible, or is that just a pipe dream?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. So I think everybody's kind of stuck in this before COVID era. Now we're in COVID era, and no one knows when after COVID happens, if it happens, or what it looks like. But I think there's some credence to be lent to the argument that you just have a massive amount of retail trading by folks who are either living on their stimulus checks and have nothing else to do. Previously there was a little bit of that because sports gambling was gone. Now sports gambling is back, so can't really make that same argument. But then you've got professionals who are kind of living at home and have nothing else to do because they have free time here and there. So I don't know whether this is enough of a sticky situation where the matter persists past a certain level of fun everyone's having with this, and so I don't know if that's enough of an impetus to give rise to a whole new business.
And you think maybe people just forget about this in a few weeks or months or years? Or
I feel like folks are gonna forget about some part of this in a few weeks and just go on to the next rage on Twitter or whatever that is, whether it's the price of Bitcoin again or whoever
Yeah, how fleeting is this meme? My mom was even saying yesterday, hey, what happened to everyone trying to switch to Signal? Looks like no one's talking about it anymore. Yeah. But I do wonder, so I'm not super up to date on how Common Stock works or these other social money platforms, but what does this mean as a moment for them, and where does it open up opportunities that people are looking for? Ooh, Max disagrees. This is a seminal moment.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of a moment. I don't feel like we're going to forget about it. I mean, I think the Twitter kind of mob thing may simmer down a bit, but I don't know that means it wasn't enough of a moment to almost, I see Twitter as this supernova, and it sort of casts out all this energy, and then the energy is out in the world and people are connected and care about it and are thinking about this, even if that's not the hot topic of the moment. So I kind of think it is more of a seminal moment, in the same way that I don't know, you think about September 11th changed the way we travel, air travel works even today, where we are, nearly 20 years later. But it was a moment that everybody learned about and rallied around, and whether the decisions were good or bad, around how we've reorganized ourselves to deal with it. Even though we don't talk about it every day, it really still reverberates and lots of impact in our lives. And I feel like this kind of thing, the Signal WhatsApp thing, I don't think it's done. It's just not as interesting as the GameStop thing.
Yeah.
But I think it will continue to propagate, and Signal will continue to sort of expand its footprint and utility. And I think this is just like that supernova moment for this issue, but I don't think it dies down and everybody moves on. I think it just like lives in the world now in a new way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I think to me, what maybe the exact action dies down, but I think what will persist is the discussion and the kind of debate around who gets to deplatform, who gets to regulate, who gets to choose, right? Like if the SEC has not come out with something saying, hey, stop trading, right, or halt a security because a circuit breaker was tripped, how have we provided or given power to the various platforms? I think that definitely will persist. I think the flip side of this to be seen in some weeks is the people who are the similarity of the retail investors who right now might be suffering or really enjoying themselves. There's someone on the other side of those bets who's going to be really having fun in 4 weeks or 5 weeks when GameStop itself is not the discussion. Maybe the broader discussion is, and GameStop is down back to regular prices. Whoever's bought puts on that is going to have a really great day. So someone is going to come out on the other end saying, hey, this was a great time.
Yeah. I think what you were saying about sort of like the broader discussion being around who gets to deplatform and some of those dynamics, interesting also in context of Olivia's comment right here about just, I feel like there's been a lot of discussion about kind of journalism on Twitter as well, and we were talking about this yesterday, like decentralized models for funding journalism and who gets to report on what stories. And I think her point here was that like the mainstream media outlets seem to be only like representing institutional investors in terms of the speakers they're bringing on to talk about these things. But then if you obviously look at like Twitter, it's a very different story, or Reddit would be a very different story. Just the mismatch on reporting. I wonder what the average like news consumers take on this even is.
Right. And I think Olivia's pointing out that like, GME and AMC and Robinhood investors are kind of quiet so far. And it wouldn't surprise me if that's sort of a risk, kind of a decided, decision to not say anything. Because I think, it's easy for people to sort of opine when they're not under scrutiny from the SEC, but anybody who sort of has the other side of the story, I think everybody should be able to tell whatever piece of the story, but there's probably substantially more risk for certain players who we'd love to hear from, but just they're every word they say is going to be under the microscope, and they need to make sure they're saying the right ones.
What is this parallel that you were talking about in the chat?
Tilray, yeah.
Oh, Tilray had a similar short squeeze a couple of years ago. I think it was 2018, maybe, if I'm not mistaken. And they were kind of same monumental increase in price, and obviously came back down to where the natural price should have been. And the CEO had put out a statement today from Tilray. He said something like, he was like, hey, here's my advice to the GME and AMC execs is like, hey, your stock is not your company and your company is not your stock. Like, this is going to be an absolutely insane time, and people are going to be, kind of like DK said, hounding you for comment or doing things like, hey, go raise some more stock or do a secondary offering or something. And he's like, hey, just take a very slow, smooth.
Yeah.
Do you know how much kind of how much latitude they may have in, like, let's say that you're an exec at GME today, and you can, how much latitude and timing do you have to issue a secondary, and how much responsibility do you have? Is there any kind of precedent or other stories that we could think about to relate here?
Oh, I don't know about the mechanisms and the timings and whatnot, but I think Hertz tried doing something similar back in April or whatever that was, and kind of they had a very similar issue of Robinhood investors driving up their price after they declared bankruptcy. And so that was similar but different because it wasn't really a short squeeze. There was no hedge fund on the other side, and then Hertz came out the next day and said, "Oh, great! The price has gone up so much because of the retail investor, and we'll do a secondary offering." And I think the SEC shut that down the next day because Hertz had already filed for bankruptcy. So they were like, "This is not quite the way out of bankruptcy. Your business model is still garbage, right? It's not going to generate cash flows." So that might be a good one to look at.
Right. And that was earlier this year, was it, with Hertz and trading on Robinhood? That was
that was after the March bottom in the markets. I think it was somewhere in April, May, or something like that.
So what exactly happened? The COVID hit, markets tanked. Hertz was kind of on the skids, and they filed for bankruptcy.
Yeah, I think Hertz, in general, had been just kind of struggling with that, and the whole no travel thing kind of just killed rental car markets, and so they filed for actual bankruptcy, and then the stock prices went through the roof because everybody on Robinhood, and this was that was the first case study into kind of retail mania. Was, hey, look, folks are at home, they may have gotten a stimulus check, they don't have work, they don't have sports to go watch, so what are they going to do? I think that kind of started driving up the stock price, and then Hertz executives said, "Oh, great, maybe we should sell some stock at this price and get some of these folks to buy more." And then the SEC was kind of like, "Hey, you can't, in good faith." I'm guessing this was the argument, was you can't in good faith offer a security that is in bankruptcy, and so that quickly put an end to that.
Right. Yeah, we were talking yesterday about this concept of kind of the belief systems and how far forward you're willing to look when thinking about kind of a public equity. And so, I think what we see with GameStop, I think any rational kind of outside observer would probably suggest that this is some form of manipulation, and whether that should be legal or not legal, I don't want to really, even comment on, but just the fact that there's not a business fundamental, or I don't think there's an optimist projection about the amazing business that GameStop may grow into that would support the $24 billion valuation or whatever it kind of reached its peak. But then, I think so that one's maybe a more clear example of a form of manipulation, or a form of kind of, people gathering, and let's call it manipulation. And then I think there's examples, that have had run-ins with the SEC, but probably have more substance behind it when you look at something like Tesla. So Tesla as a stock, they actually produce a fantastic product, and they have, insatiable demand, and they have they're moving the world forward into a new future. And so it really is, hard to figure out exactly what that business should be worth. And so despite all of that uncertainty, I think there's people who are so extremely bullish on that they're willing to award the far future value, kind of on a, hopefully discounted risk adjusted basis, of what that equity should be worth. And, it seems like it seems like it lives somewhere on a spectrum of one is manipulation, meaning the GameStop thing is manipulation. The Tesla thing I wouldn't call manipulation. I think it's actually a belief in the future, but that belief stems from storytelling and narrative, and compelling, Elon Musk is a compelling storyteller. And so, it sort of makes me think a little bit about my, how convinced am I about, my knowledge or understanding of markets, and how do you decide what is storytelling and what is just really good storytelling, what's actually moving us forward, as a society, as humanity. How do we apply capital in productive ways to accomplish more together? Mm-hmm. And I look at Tesla, and it's I don't buy or sell and own any of the stock, but it seems like I'm excited that there's so many people so optimistic that we as a humanity get to move toward that future faster. And so where do you draw the line on kind of outright manipulation versus actual promises and narrative?
Yeah. Yeah, I think my dad was saying this earlier as well, with the whole like Tesla, the narratives around Tesla and like who's stoking them. Maybe that's an important part of it too. Like Elon Musk himself tweeting out versus some guy on Wall Street Bets.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good quote.
Which one? I missed it. Oh, Morgan Housel. Yeah. Investing isn't just the study of finance. It's also the study of how people behave with money and how the behavior can be irrational.
Yeah.
Morgan Housel.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's so much going on here that's just more than Wall Street. That's right. It's like Elon will will tweet something in support of Wall Street Bets, and before you know it, it's exploded even more. And then Chamath will go out on CNBC and say something, and so it's just fascinating. I mean, Mark Cuban tweeted something this morning in favor of the whole small guy investor thing, and it's just fascinating the amount of market moving power that now exists in concentrated things. It's like folks are dying to get somehow a retweet by like a couple of these folks, and it will propel the stock or the security through the roof.
Yeah, I mean it is I think it does remove a lot of what, I don't know. I always felt, if you asked me 20 years ago, I would have said that like markets are pretty cold and rational. And it's, there's people who believe one and believe the other, and that kind of sets the price. And I feel so much different about that today, that like the stories we tell set the prices and the belief systems, and then the highly connected nature of everybody who has an opinion, and getting those opinions out and amplified in different ways means that like the stories shape the future in a way that it's almost like the story and the narrative and the ability to amplify them become more important than the reality, because they allow us to accomplish the reality, which is like, I still have not gotten myself fully kind of in tune with what that all means.
Yeah, it's very Harari.
About kind of the fiction, the shared fiction.
Yeah, the world runs on these shared fictions.
Yeah, and I think Harari kind of says, I think his example is like you take a chimpanzee, and you sort of ask him to, give up, food in exchange for like a rock or something. He would never do it. But humans are able to do that, and we can share that fiction together. And that actually helps. It's amazing. You could actually, not knowing somebody, you could actually take yourself here and with, a US dollar or a piece of gold or Bitcoin or whatever, you can show up any other human on the planet, and you can productively transact with that person. Yeah. It's just amazing. It's amazing. We just all we've coordinated in this way.
Yeah, I mean, money is an amazing concept. Going very about all of this, but
yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that I find interesting about Bitcoin, is that the concept of money and that shared fiction, in the case of the US dollar, is still tied to, the belief system in US and the dollar reserve, and the, US as like a, military force, and, kind of, a player in the world stage. But it's really still dependent on like, what does the Federal Reserve choose to do, and how do they choose to change the money supply, and what does the Fed, how are they sort of, I think it's quite political to say they're doing the right thing, but I think they're, I think they're doing something that they believe to be in service of their goals. but it's still like fallible human judgment that drives that those sets of decisions, which end up reverberating throughout the world stage. And so there really is no you have like the unit of measurement of a foot or a meter, right? And that's kind of a standard unit of measure. And we've kind of accepted, most of the world will accept that a US dollar is a standard unit of value for a standard unit of account for value, but it's really not as standard as a foot or a meter is. It's dependent on some politicians, whether well-intentioned or not, some politicians, decisions, which are, ultimately human decisions and fallible decisions.
Yeah.
And so I feel like Bitcoin or a Satoshi is a standard unit of measure, and we don't really know how to think about it with respect to things like US dollars, which we're more comfortable thinking about. But it's a standard unit of measure that can't change, is apolitical. Nobody can tell you that it should be something that it's not. It is whatever it is,
Yeah.
So it's pretty fun to think about.
Definitely. How almost like fragile in a way these concepts are, but I mean, actually, I wouldn't say fragile, because I think when beliefs become shared beliefs, when these fictions are shared across multitudes of people, they're like, how fictional are they really, right? Like, they take a lot of power.
Yeah, I mean, even like, I think the idea of money is one, but I think the idea of like, a government, like what is the U.S. government? It's a bunch of buildings, a bunch of people, a bunch of documents, but there's not really like it's really just a shared fiction, right? Or like a corporation, I think Harari mentions like Google.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can use the products and, they're highly utilitarian for us and they help us, but they're also, kind of it's just a collection of people and buildings and servers, and it itself is kind of this, this fiction that we all have kind of decided to agree on, but is ultimately just a coordination mechanism.
Yeah. Maybe that's really the key difference, because then you can say, well, everything is kind of a fiction, right? But the difference is how coordinated and how collective is that fiction,
right?
In terms of like how robust it is and how many consequences its mechanics end up having for other parts of society.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, what is truth in that world then? How do you sort of prosecute truth? This is like when you when you read Wikipedia and you keep clicking on the thing, eventually you get to philosophy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's no answers.
Max shared an article in chat.
What you got, Max? U.S. capitalism, socialism?
Yeah.
Let me check it out. Oh, I hit the paywall.
I'm trying to open it up.
So it's kind of like low interest rates.
What's up?
This is talking like low interest rates. Is that kind of one of the core? Socialism for the rich, capitalism for the rest.
Oh yeah. I feel like I've seen a lot of Bernie tweets about this. general point. Deficits don't matter as long as you can service them, and the role of government in developed countries can keep expanding. Yeah, that's an interesting kind of thing to throw into all of this, like momentum around decentralization.
Yeah, I mean, it's talking about like the past few years should have been an era of huge creative destruction with so many new cheap digital tools of innovation, so much access to cheap, high-powered computing, and so much easy money. Startups should have been exploding. They were not. So is it saying that we're stuck? This number of startups has increased in the pandemic, but that may be because so many businesses closed.
Where is that part? In the same place? Same article?
Yeah, same article, a little bit below. Here, I'll paste it.
Well, I remember a couple of weeks ago, you had an interesting point on low interest rates in general, like, and how they affect this whole ecosystem, the tech startup ecosystem. Seems like he's saying that, well, refresh me on your view, but it seems like he's saying consistent with what you were saying before, but it's not really playing out because of other kind of gatekeepers that exist.
Like other factors that are causing it that way. Yeah, I mean, it seems like I think everybody's chasing growth. Where can you find growth in the world? And, outside of building new technology systems, there's not a lot of growth in the world. Like we're sort of, we've, a lot of assets have appreciated in value over the years, and we don't have a lot of like upside surprise in kind of existing assets. And so, things can continue growing at some rate, but without change, we don't actually have, dramatic appreciation. And I think technology is the area where we have dramatic appreciation at times. And I think that is, in a sense, why, technology is interesting and exciting, is because you don't know what's going to happen next. Like something else could unfold. But everything else that doesn't have that kind of disruptive, reshaping, reformative nature is kind of more just almost like stable. And hence we have like these zero interest rate environments where people are trying to figure out what to do with capital. And, the most productive things to do with capital seem to be to put them, against technology opportunities that could surprise to the upside with how impactful they could be. But there's a kind of a related shaping force, which is like technology. The magic of technology is that like, across the species, we can invent technologies that give us a lot of leverage to be, to help everybody, right? Like, a small group of people can invent something that could touch 7 billion people. And you don't need everybody to do all the work in order for those 7 billion people to be served by that technology. So that's that, in a sense, that's the promise and the magic of technology. But it also, like, that's the optimistic view. I think the pessimistic view, or the one that people point out, is like, that also means those 7 billion people aren't sort of, as employable, or, there's not necessarily like jobs for everybody. And I think, maybe this part of the solution to this is we just need more technologies, and that, like, if technology is where we're going to grow the pies of the world, and kind of move humanity forward, maybe we just need more technologies to happen sooner, which can help more people contribute to those ecosystems of development, and more people benefit from all the advantages that they provide. And it seems that that's kind of what the capital markets are telling us, right? They're kind of saying, like, we don't see a lot of growth outside of these changes. And so having, zero interest rates means that, like, if you've got $1 sitting around, rather than putting it in a bank account, put it into some sort of asset. And if that asset is something that's well understood and well priced, it's probably not going to grow there either. So you want to find something that has a lot of uncertainty around it. And I think that tends to be things that have this kind of creative, scalable potential.
Yeah.
So the optimist is that it actually should help pull the future forward faster.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in a sense, I think people like to dismiss a lot of Silicon Valley and say, oh, like, a lot of people working on nonsense things, or that's a bad idea, or that's not worth exploring. And I mean, oftentimes, there are a lot of weird things that get tried, and a lot of things that, in hindsight, you can say that was a bad idea because in hindsight, you can know that it didn't work, and it's easy to claim victory with that prescient decision or assessment that this was a bad idea. But yeah, I think I don't mind so much. I think it's actually a good thing for more experimentation to happen, because it helps. It helps, like, I think it just helps humanity move forward faster to have more experimentation. And it's the weird stuff. It's the stuff that's a little bit out of left field, I think, that sometimes has the most impact. So it's not always the thing that we're expecting.
Yeah.
I saw Raja just said why. Was that why about something I just mentioned?
I think that's a comment below.
Why does Yellen want to start taxing unrealized capital gains?
Wants to start taxing unrealized capital gains.
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. How do you even mark these things to market? I don't even know.
Yeah.
I mean, unrealized capital gains. I don't know the specifics of her proposal, but I assume you need to somehow, mark these things to market, and they're not always liquid. So I don't know all of the proposal. I thought I heard
either.
Kind of a headline proposal that people are a bit concerned about, which is like kind of the taxing all unrealized capital gains. And I thought maybe I heard a more specific one that was around an estate tax or kind of a inheritance tax on unrealized capital gains, so it wouldn't reset cost basis upon inheritance or kind of upon a death. I don't know that I'm not the expert at tax, but my understanding is I think upon death, the cost basis, maybe I think there's often not a taxable event, or the cost basis resets up so that the gain is effectively like never realized, or that part of the gain is never realized, and so hence not taxed. And I think she was suggesting that maybe that part would be taxed, if I recall correctly.
I like DK's idea totally.
What's my idea? Maybe he's talking. That was just my observation of Yellen's idea. It wasn't my idea. I don't take any credit.
You might get a lot of feedback for that one. That's your idea.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't pass it off. No. I mean, I think it's complicated, because I think at any tax system, there's winners and losers. There's people who benefit from the new system, and there's people who don't benefit from the new system. And I don't think I think a lot of this stuff gets built around sound bites.
Mm-hmm.
Where there's like there's a simple a simple statement that somebody can state, like, oh, we're gonna cut taxes to zero or tax the rich, and they're like, it's easy to get people excited about an idea like that, where it fits into a soundbite. But I think the reality is always like much more complicated.
Yeah.
Roger's saying that kind of thing would lead to a lot of downstream demand, HD, Home Depot, and Lowe's.
Oh, they're talking about housing inflation and
yeah,
prices.
Yeah. And we do see that, right? Like I think we do see that, and I think we probably seems reasonable that we would continue to see housing, reshaping in ways. I think somebody had told me once. I don't have the link on this, but I'm sure we could find. Somebody had told me that I think when was it like a railroad? Maybe there was a railroad in Taipei that got built, or maybe it was Hong Kong. But this was, I don't know, 60 years ago or 80 years ago or something. The railroad, that was proposed and whatever that came into town actually got built, and while that was transformative for the town, it was really transformative for the real estate around that station, and that kind of, everybody talks about all of the wealth that was built in the railroad, but it was really the wealth that was built in the real estate around that railroad was like dramatically more. And I think we're having a societal shift right now that has some parallels there, which is kind
What's
of
the railroad? No.
Yeah, what's the railroad is I think the rise of remote work, and so the railroad is the internet railroad, meaning like you could live in a mountain town in Colorado, purely hypothetically. You could live in Alaska or another non-continental state.
Yeah.
Again, purely hypothetically.
Yeah, but people on the internet definitely do not know where to find me.
But I think that should have an impact. Like if this is actually a major trend, a major movement, it should have an impact on real estate prices in places that were like not as accessible and not as livable and not as employable in the past.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I wonder we're seeing Max is mentioning Miami and Austin in the chat. Like we're seeing some places kind of emerge as hubs, at least for the moment. Oh, hi, Olivia. But I wonder, it seems like some of the impact will be just like distributed across a lot of different places, and then like where will it actually galvanize like a lot of rebirth and momentum, and why? So with Miami and Austin, like there are lots of factors. The one that's the most in the media is kind of how the mayors and like the government is using these new kinds of civic engagement to sort of evangelize their cities, and their cities have probably like good availability of housing and like skilled workers and whatnot. But trying to think of like if the internet is the new railroad, like what is the like new equivalent of the surrounding real estate? Like how do you identify where those places will be, where the gains accrue the most?
Yeah. Well, it seems like it should be. I mean, I think Austin and Miami are fairly, call them like maybe. I mean, I don't mean this dismissively, but like obvious targets. Like, yeah, everybody understands that there's kind of this San Francisco tech exodus, and there's a lot of excitement around Miami and Austin as potential, kind of hubs or destinations for that. So I think those are, I wouldn't discount those examples. I think they're strong ones, but I think the less obvious ones are the ones that I always find more interesting, which is like, pick a town like Santa Barbara, it's like kind of a vacation, almost, like a very secondary city that you wouldn't think about as a place to live unless you were kind of planning to be on vacation or retired or something.
Yeah. And,
it's like beautiful weather, not the kind of large city feel that something like a San Francisco or LA would have. And I think that kind of thing is, it seems like it's like newly viable. Like you couldn't really do it in a major way pre-pandemic. And I think kind of, with pandemic and post-pandemic, I think it becomes, a lot more viable. Depends on kind of what you're looking for. But I think that kind of thing is fun. And then there's also the matter of, I think like Austin and Miami are, attractive to people who are thinking about sort of tax, kind of tax situations. And so I think there's I think tax is like one side of it, but I think there's also services.
Mm-hmm.
And so you think about all the places that people go and what is the trade-off of how people are taxed and how services are provided. And is there kind of a clear kind of parallel? Is it sort of a reasonable equilibrium where those meet? And I think in the old world, kind of pre-pandemic, where people are not really thinking that remote work is a viable thing at any real scale. I think, we have like one set of decisions and experiences. I think post-pandemic, those probably, those could probably.
Interesting. Yeah.
I don't know if did we read The Sovereign Individual before?
No, but are you
we talked about it.
Yeah, you should link to it. But are you kind of like alluding to rethinking the tax system overall if people are no longer so tied to a local community, like where your tax money goes, like in terms of local pull and push, give and take?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you'd hope that, tax dollars that come into a state would go toward the services that are provided to people who live in that state, and that there's some amount of like oversight to a system to enable those dollars to be efficiently allocated. And I think I wouldn't guess that we're at a very good equilibrium right now. I think we have like very little transparency, and with decades of low transparency and large dollar amounts, I think you just have like bad actors creep into the system and inefficiently allocate toward the services that we want, that we claim to want to collectively provide. So, I think my hope is that states and municipalities and governing bodies feel more beholden to their constituencies to actually deliver on services and have more transparency. And it might become a little bit of like I think you look at like what Suarez is doing in Miami. It's like a very early small example of like a politician who's saying like, hey, I'm here for you. I want to talk to you. And sure, he's courting billionaires. And I think he's trying to help Miami actually have a presence on, at least the world stage of tech, at least, a seat at the table. And I think, you could imagine other states and municipalities that feel less empowered and feel like they have less, going on, less of that momentum, that they'd want to try to create some of that momentum. And maybe some of that comes like, imagine you take some place like, I don't know, Arizona, which is like livable and would be attractive to a lot of people. And you actually say like, look, instead of trying to court tech, we're going to try to build the very best education system that's available to every one of our residents. And the way you do that is you take the tax base and you reshape the way the educational services are provided to be a much more efficient delivery mechanism. Mm-hmm. And people who value that would be attracted to that and actually can viably then move to Arizona if that's, if that sort of fits their value. So this is kind of like the sovereign individual is like a pretty extreme example of this, but I think it's more like, can governments, can you create a tighter feedback loop where governments are really more in service of the citizenry and people that they claim to be in service of?
Interesting. Yeah, because they just are more mobile than they have been before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of makes like federalism more viable.
Yeah. And I think it's nice because it's like a competitive system then. I mean, there's competitive system at the, I think, sovereign level, like who's going to move to New Zealand. I mean, there's people that talk about that. But then, yeah, I think the federal system allows for kind of state to state competition for, for the best, whether it's, if you value education, you move to place X, and if you value, other types of services, or
right,
if you value weather, you move to Southern California.
Yeah. But for whom though? Like the people who are most mobile in this system are people like everyone on this call, kind of,
Right.
like
Yeah.
highly skilled, educated, probably working in tech, able to work remotely, but
Right.
it also brings in interesting power dynamics of who the government is incentivized to serve, because the
Right.
primary school teacher is not moving anytime soon if they want to keep
Right.
tenure at their school. So
Yeah, I mean, what is did you say a private school teacher or a public school teacher?
like a public school teacher at a primary school, like jobs that
Right.
are more rooted are
Yeah.
normally, it seems like, more blue collar and less
Right.
mobile in this new world. So
Yeah. And I think these things can't all be changed at once. They take time, right? But I think that there's, I think it may be that the thing we think of as a public school, like a primary school, public school teacher,
yeah,
like actually should be reshaped or reformed in a way. I think there's a bunch of people who are poking around at new models, and I don't suspect that every one of them will be a successful model.
you mean like some of these more mobile, like learning pods or integrating remote aspects into education as well, themes like that?
Possibly that, or I would bet that there are ways to empower a new class of educators, kind of broadly speaking. And there's a lot of different flavors for how that might actually look. But I think a way to allow a new class of educators to sort of, educate people and actually encourage young, ambitious people to aspire to that as a career path, because it looks like it looks like a great career and a great career path, and it doesn't feel like, I think part of the problem is the structures that we have today are not as empowering or enabling of, not as attractive to maybe some of the most ambitious people. And I think that's not a property of education. That's like a property of the systems that we've designed around education. So, I wonder if we could build a better system. We could build systems that, whether it's something like pods or something, maybe there's online tools or networks, or maybe there's new ways to create like the celebrity teacher, the one that I've heard, actually, I remember years ago, I think Bill Gurley wrote a thing. Let me see if I can find it. I think in Korea, there's like, I think test prep for kind of, the equivalent of like the SAT or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
is like heavily, competed and invested in category. Mega study. Yeah, he wrote this in. Have you heard of that company before? Are you familiar with it?
I haven't. The general theme makes a lot of sense. And it's great for a lot of people. It's great for teachers who have more ability to make income and like scale their talents at teaching in new ways. And education is just one dimension of it, but I do wonder like which are the trickiest parts of society to sort of make remote or mobile friendly. Because I guess my overall point is that federalism only seems like a good system if everyone has mobility to move between different providers being states in this case. And right now that's definitely not the case. It seems like it'll become more and more accessible for people in different professions, but there will or seem to be some that are particularly tricky and like sticky.
Yeah, I don't think there's an obvious like silver bullet panacea to just solve all of these problems.
Yeah.
But I do think that technology and technology systems provide better ability to communicate and publish and share. So things like education, which I think should be more. I think we should be doing more to fundamentally rethink the way we educate. And I'm not proposing what that solution exactly looks like, but I think we could come up with a dozen right here.
Yeah.
But I think that kind of thing, I think we need to break out of what we're doing today. I think what we're doing today doesn't work, and we don't just need like more funding to the current systems. I think we need to be like more exploration in new systems. You mentioned pods, but I'm sure there's others as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, the example from the Bill Gurley post I shared, there's a quote that kind of addresses what you're describing, which is like many commenters will likely note that the market for elective education is much different in Korea, where parents are obsessed with their children's education. It's far different from here in the US. So, I think that cuts across, even in the US, there's certainly different.
Yeah.
If like whatever we value, we can get good at. And I think, just if we value it more highly and I think we can structurally make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in India too, like a lot of these test prep type companies, I saw Biju's is like on the Indian cricket team shirts now, and it's huge. It's like an edtech online tutoring firm. Have you heard of it?
Mm-hmm. I haven't. It's called Biju.
Yeah, it's this.
BIJU.
Second, third order impacts of technology-based systems are also important. In Houston, the school districts are spending lots of hours and money providing families with iPads, Chromebooks. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, nice. Oh yeah, this looks great.
Yeah. I mean, Asad's comment is also great because, like, it just makes all of this. The last year has just taught us how access to good internet and a computer device is just like more and more like a utility that we need to make sure everyone has. If we're thinking about making all portions of the population like mobile and able to be empowered and like move around to different locations without impacting their lives and scale their talents and explore new talents.
Right. I mean, I think the change maybe I think we're already seeing some of the change of how people, can educate and do educate and organize. I mean, certainly Khan Academy is an example of great content that gets created that is accessible to everybody in a way that 20 years ago we didn't have. And so in a sense, all you need is really broadband connection and an internet enabled device, which now I think it's, very pervasive in the world. I don't know the latest stats, but I thought I read something recently that said 80 or 90% of adults, across the world, out of 7 billion people, some fraction of which are adults, large fraction, 80 or 90% of which now have mobile phones with internet connections.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would say we've made a lot of progress toward this, but I don't think we have really systems. We just have the availability of the information and knowledge. I think that's a huge positive and huge step forward, but we still have these old systems that are not reshaped yet.
Yeah. This is something I don't know or think about often, but it's so important. As I was comment earlier, the availability of broadband. There are parts of the country in the West where primary care doctors have to wait hours for the results of a lab scan to download. No one talks about this in the US. But there are some interesting internet initiatives going on, right?
I mean, Starlink comes to mind.
Yeah. And then what is Facebook doing? Is that mostly abroad or also here?
I'm not familiar. I know Facebook has had some kind of discussions with providers, but I didn't know if they're working on their own infrastructure stuff. Do they have their own infrastructure projects going? My understanding is I think Google recently shut down
Yeah, that's what I
Loon.
was thinking of.
Were you thinking about Loon? Loon was Google's balloon project to, to make broadband more accessible to more people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Loon was recently shut down, maybe in the last week or two it was mentioned. January 21st, so yeah, like a week ago.
Oh, wow.
Google to shut down Loon.
Yeah. Oh, you want to invite Assad back up? I think he's around.
Oh, sure.
As he's beginning to type super long messages.
Yeah.
Oh, hey guys.
Hey.
Sorry, I had to step away for a call.
No worries. We went from GameStop to the future of education, and now
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, this broadband stuff is super critical and like so interesting, yet I feel like under discussed, or at least I am not very informed about it. But we were just talking about like Starlink and kind of internet availability initiatives going on as well.
Yeah, I'll have to dig up some of that stuff. There was some really good Bloomberg kind of long form coverage on it, and the really interesting challenge is so in some parts of the country you can actually organize as a cooperative and start your own internet company, which I think is fascinating.
Oh wow!
Because I think and this is a pet peeve of mine from being an Army signal officer. Is you ask most people, hey, where does the internet come from? And they point towards the router and they say, oh, the router provides internet. No, it doesn't. It just provides Wi-Fi. And so I think it's really cool that someone can just like make their own internet. But the
what does that mean when you say make their own internet? How does that work?
Oh, so I mean, like you could start a company, you could start a small cooperative in the Midwest or somewhere and become your own broadband provider. Like you can go buy these.
And are you like you're like reselling from MCI or some backbone or something?
Like I don't know how the exact mechanics of it work, but I would imagine you're buying all the infrastructure if you can to support a full network, right? Everything that you need to build the network, including laying down cable or however you're doing it. But then the interesting part to that comes in with some of the larger providers in certain jurisdictions can lobby the government to say that, hey, these small cooperatives can't form because they're going to hurt our chances or something. It's a really perverse argument where they actually prevent the folks from doing that. And it's like, hey, you on the one hand, you tell me that I'm too remote of a location for you to, go lay down some fiber, but you don't want me doing it on my own either. So what do I do? Just a fascinating thing.
Yeah.
There was I think this happened in telecom, like in the, 80s or 90s, where, if you wanted to serve a certain location, you had to stretch cable, really far to, farther away if there was like a rural, some farmer who lives, miles out of town and it wouldn't be cost effective to serve that farmer, because of regulation, you actually had to serve them if you wanted access to be able to sort of have, lay cables throughout the profitable lines. So it kind of subsidizes the unprofitable lines, but the profitable lines through kind of some sort of regulatory rulings. And I think that had like pretty transformational impact on how I think they were called competitive local exchange carriers, if I recall correctly. So that there's kind of a little bit of, and this was, I think, when, I don't know all the history, but this was like, the, Bell and then the Baby Bells. And then I think there's like the CLEX, and there's kind of this similar history. I mean, it's different technology, but similar kinds of decisions and policies that were enacted. And it's not clear to me that there's a lot different I don't know how all of the kind of backhaul internet infrastructure deals work, but you have to get connected somewhere. So you're dealing with somebody and you have to license from somebody. And my guess is a lot of these things have some precedent in how decision-making works around them. Raja just shared a story about how some people built a local cheap service in Manhattan freeinternet.name.
Oh, what is that?
I don't know. I haven't seen this one.
Oh, it looks like
So
more
these are-
more like a research hub, like if you're trying to figure out where UFS
These are free internet.
I mean, similar structures for local organization already exist on the electric grid, because electric co-ops are a thing. They're well studied, well regulated. I mean, that's regulated industry anyway. But that same type of, I think it comes back to, Mishti might have said it earlier as well, is like the lack of utility label afforded to internet. I think that is probably the underpinning.
Yeah.
So I wonder if things like, I mean, do you see things like Starlink as, it's in a sense it's a different technology approach, but still requires like massive resources to deploy and manage. So it has like some centralizing forces there. Do you think that's kind of part of a solution to some of the things you're suggesting, or does that end up just kind of recreating maybe some similar problems?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not. I mean, I've obviously heard of Starlink. I haven't looked into how exactly it works, but some of the folks in some of these rural areas will use satellite access direct to internet, right? So you can go put a dish on top of your roof and point it at a satellite and get internet.
Yeah.
Now it might only work when the sky is clear,
Mhm.
Yeah.
which might not be all the time. So I don't know like whether Starlink solves that, but I think the fundamental issue there comes back to who should bear the cost for an area or a subset of people having availability to that, right? So there's instances where people have literally said, "Hey, I'll pay for the cable to be laid to my house," and they're like, "Well, I can't really do that. That's not the government doesn't just do that." Or in the case of Starlink, if 5 people want to have that satellite, what about the other 20 people? Do they free ride? Do they not free ride? If someone's going to point a dish towards them or not point a dish towards them. So there's some things in there where kind of that good old free rider problem comes in, and you just need some aspect of someone intervening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I'm trying to remember the book that I feel like Virginia Eubanks is an author that's written a lot about this. But I wonder if there's more kind of legal action or scrutiny around this in the last year, given just, the importance of connectivity becoming so obvious. Oh, Charles just popped in too.
This is automating inequality. This Virginia Eubanks. Is this talking specifically about network access or about other topics in technology inequality?
I've only read excerpts of it, but I think it also talks a lot about kind of how, like, a lot about the technology used in different, like, homelessness kind of situations, with basically people having to trade their data away in order to get access to some basic services, like the most vulnerable parts of our populations. But I'm not entirely sure. Do you want to invite Charles up?
He is not invitable. I don't know if he's on an unsupported device or browser.
I'll turn on.
I mean, kind of touching on some of the stuff we were discussing before around kind of decentralized nature of things. I wonder if there's something around, like, I don't know if you're familiar with like any of these mesh network projects, like mesh internet connectivity. I actually used to be a beacon for one, a very old system called Phone. Have you heard of FON.com?
No.
So what I did is I had a special Wi-Fi router that I would host in my home and broadcast a signal where I would like allow people on the phone network to be able to use my home Wi-Fi. and I lived on a quiet street, so I didn't have a lot of people visiting. But just as a concept, I loved this concept. I think that was in a fairly pre-mobile era, so we didn't really have like network sharing on phones. But you could imagine, that phones themselves could create mesh networks that could share things, even not using the standard internet backhauls. And some could pop in and out of standard internet backhauls when needed, but ultimately, like if I'm texting you while sitting in the next room over, we could just transmit our packets between ourselves, and we don't even need to rely on like a heavy internet infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been fascinated by those ideas, like in mesh networking.
Mm. What's like the discourse around it now, or are you less familiar?
The more recent projects I've heard, there was one called Fire Chat, I want to say. Open Garden, I think, was kind of the company that was building that. And they had built a thing that was Fire Chat was a proprietary mobile app developed by Open Garden, which uses wireless mesh networking to enable smartphones to connect via Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, or Apple's multi-peer connectivity framework. And so this was popular when I think Hong Kong was kind of a flashpoint for this with the student riots. And it was kind of you could sort of use messaging without any internet connectivity because it was all peer-to-peer connectivity. And I think it actually like really worked and was quite a moment for it, but it didn't have enough persistence and continued density of usage. So in a sense, it's like an example of what this would look like if it worked. And like, it doesn't seem like there's any reason that this shouldn't work. It's just hard to get started and hard to get it to sustain. So, maybe I think it would be really bad to bet against this as being the future, but I think it's not clear exactly how it emerges. Because like the technology works, it's more decentralized. It allows people to have more self-sovereignty and autonomy.
Really interesting. Yeah.
There was a company.
Firechat is now discontinued. Interesting.
Yeah, that was probably 10 years ago that they were pursuing that. It was quite a while back. There was one that I think Fred Wilson from USB invested in something that was in like a mesh networking thing. Trying to think of the name of it. It was a woman who had founded it, and I thought I heard her speak at a conference, but I can't recall the name of the company at the moment. When I do a search, I see something called Venium, but I'm not sure if that's the one or maybe it was renamed.
Mm-hmm.
No, this is something different. Venium is different. This one that I recall has gone through a few different iterations. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can dig that up because I thought it was pretty cool.
Do you remember where you were reading about some of the stuff around like broadband and internet collectives, Assad? Was it just different articles and things, or?
Yeah, it was mostly. I actually really enjoy this website called Long Reads. I don't know if you've.
Oh yeah.
That's great. I've done some of it there, some of it through Bloomberg, and then a bunch of it through military professional development for kind of understanding networks. I'm a signal officer, and that's part of our job is how do you set up a military network, which in essence is just a mesh network. And so, yeah, a lot of it through there. But I think it's, to me, it's the genesis of it kind of comes from this awkward comparison that folks like to make, right? Like, hey, you could go to South Korea and you can download anything on the subway on your mobile phone faster than you can do it in Manhattan and, in a hardwired connection. Well, yes, but that doesn't quite, it's not an engineering comparison that's effective. And I think I used to make those back when I was younger because I grew up in Pakistan and I would be like, hey, why is it that in Pakistan I can get cell reception, if I put my cell phone in basically anywhere. Whereas here I can still I've tried every carrier, I've had all of them, and you will find dead spots in certain places. And then when you begin to understand, hey, how does the network work, then it starts making a lot more sense. But I mean, there's folks doing the same thing for cell phones. Like, you can, a cell company can come to you if you're in an advantageous location, pay you a little bit of rent, and plop down a tower in your house, and hey, great, and now your little corner of the world has really good cell reception. So
Yeah.
it's an engineering issue that that has to deal with cost and effectiveness, and so it's kind of not a nice comparison when you say South Korea has really good cell service and really
Right.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Were you working in the military before?
So I'm a reserve officer, so I'm still in the
Oh,
service, yeah.
wow. Okay, I didn't know this.
Did you say you're signal officer?
Yeah, so I'm a signal
What
officer.
what is a signal officer?
So signal in the Army world is two things put together. It's radios and networks. So signal in the Army is the communications arm. So we're the people who enable communications, whether that's through radio networks, through satellite networks, or through the network. And so the internet was at one point a brainchild of folks who worked in the Signal Corps. So that's my interest in it.
And what are the kinds of things, are these like operating existing systems, or is it research into new systems, or is it all of the above lives under this branch?
Mostly operating. So all the research and stuff would be things that DARPA is doing, or maybe DISA is doing out in Colorado. But our job primarily is, hey, if a field commander wants to go to Syria and he wants to have VoIP, he wants to have the ability to do a video teleconference, he wants to be able to talk to his guys in the field in a 60-mile radius, what needs to happen, what equipment do we need, which satellites can we talk to, and how do we do that in an encrypted manner?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of all of that, mostly operational.
Wow. That's super fascinating. I'm sure actually
I feel like this is the same group that before would be responsible for everybody had to learn Morse code. Is that did you have to learn that?
No, so thankfully not. But
Okay.
actually, the history of the Signal course actually is with birds, with messenger
Carrier pigeons?
carrier pigeons, and then the encryption was obviously different language or something, or simple cipher like a tic-tac-toe cipher.
Right.
And then that went into Morse code. The Signal Corps also was involved with the meteorology service and weather balloons, and how do you use weather balloons to talk to other balloons. And then in today's construct, it's radios and networks. But yeah, Morse code was definitely a big.
wow.
Right. Do you study encryption much, or kind of cryptography? Is that an interest of people?
It is.
People you work with.
It is, but so we use cryptography, and we use cryptographic techniques and keys developed by the NSA, but we don't develop them. Right. All the standard encryption that the United States uses is NSA developed, and it's shared with the Five Eyes, and those are the only people who can share it. So Canada, US, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and so they're doing a lot of the really mathematical cryptography technique, where our job is knowing, hey, when does one cipher change to the next? When do we need to update it? What do we do if we've been compromised? Kind of all of the front end stuff. Right.
I remember when I first I kind of worked on a application of cryptography a long time ago, and when I joined the group working on that, they gave me the book. I don't know if you've seen the book. Bruce Schneier, I think is how you say his name, but it's applied cryptography. It's kind of considered the Bible of cryptography by many people. But I found it fascinating. It's kind of call it, probably more like the applications of cryptography versus researching cryptography. But there's so many interesting puzzles and kind of almost, if you have a mind that is attracted to games and puzzles and you like thinking about the world that way, reading this book is just such a gem. You learn about all these interesting exploits and cool ways of structuring data and information that you wouldn't necessarily think about, but that actually has signal buried in it, and sort of what is the difference between kind of privacy and security, and
Absolutely.
Sort of how do you think about the different edges of that. So this is a book from long back that I loved around that.
Yeah, no, I've heard of this in a different context, but I think that it comes back to what we were saying about privacy, security. Like these are things that are layered on top of each other, and they only work in layers. That's why in cybersecurity, defense in depth is a thing, and I think I just find it funny when folks kind of talk about things being secure or private, or I'm like, well, there's degrees of security. Just the question is, when does it become unsecure? And is someone who is interested in breaking through your security motivated enough to wait that long?
Right. I think one of there's plenty of takeaways from that book, but one of the things that turned me on to, and this was kind of early in my career, was like the stark difference between security that's actually security through obscurity and then actual security. And that's the idea, the way he articulates it in the book is, he says, like, if you actually are security through obscurity, you're kind of trying to hide the thing and put it in a dark cave where nobody will think to look at it. Whereas if it's actual security, then you would say, okay, you have a secure vault, then put it in the middle of Times Square in Manhattan, and nobody will be able to get access to it. And I think that it's like a very basic idea in security, but it starts to if you haven't thought a lot about security and privacy and the implications and how these systems work, I think it's a bit of a frame shift, at least was for me back then.
Yeah, so we actually use both principles. One of our primary mechanisms of encryption, and the first layer of that is we call it frequency hop ciphertext, and this is all unclassified in case you're worried the NSA is listening.
I'm sure they are.
But in the context of what we call frequency hop ciphertext, literally all it's doing is it changes the frequency on which you talk 100 times a second. So that's the obscurity part, where the transmitting frequency and the receiving frequency are all jumping 100 times a second. They have to land on the same one at the same time. Mm-hmm. Then on top of that is the actual security part, which is the message itself happens to be garbled because it's encrypted by a cipher.
Right. So just because you build a secure system doesn't mean you shouldn't also obscure it if possible. But don't believe. I think the lesson or the takeaway from that is, don't believe that obscurity is a substantial form of security. Like, think about security as if obscurity does not exist, and then go ahead and obscure whatever you've designed.
Exactly. As
an additional measure, let's say.
Exactly.
There was a funny one. Another example I recall from the book, which I liked, was how like a bitmap graphic will have a hex code which defines the each pixel in the bitmap, so that you can see a n by m picture, and it'll have a hex code which defines each pixel, what's the color of each pixel. And so there's it's a very low density form of storage, but if you change the lowest order bit of that hex, so either the 1 or the 0, you use it for your own message, anybody looking at it would see the thing. They'd see a bitmap image. They could look at the image would basically look fine, and you could basically convince somebody that this is just some image. You wouldn't notice a lot of artifact in it, but you actually get to store kind of payload in that image, which is like a form of obscuring it by making it look as if it's something that it's not, but there's actually real message contained within that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the fundamental principles we use which we call retransmitting, which essentially is just trying to create a long mesh network, is you can retransmit something through a system that's encrypted with a out-of-date encryption key. so it can't decrypt it.
Hmm.
But it is, as long as it's encrypted in passage, and the receiving transmitter, the receiving end, has the appropriate encryption, they can decrypt it. So the person in the middle is just going to hear static.
Right.
They're not going to get anything useful. But the person on the receiving end who has the appropriate encryption key can decrypt it. So while the person in the middle who's retransmitting is still considered encrypted and secure, that doesn't necessarily mean they can decrypt it.
Yeah. I'm just going to link Bruce Schneier. I think I'm saying it right. Apologies if I didn't. But he has a pretty famous blog now. He wrote the book, I don't know, 25 years ago, but he has a famous blog now called Schneier on Security, which has been for many years. But yeah, if you're into these topics, that is a good one. So I linked that in the chat there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'm actually looking at transitioning into cyber as an official career field in the Army. So I'm looking at more on this stuff. So
super cool.
Should be fun.
Cool. All right. Well, we have been.
Covered a lot we
covered a lot. A couple hours of lunch.
Went to shared fictions, the future of education, cybersecurity. Love it. Cool.
Well, with that, then let's wrap. So thanks, Asad, for spending so much time with us. I think it was great to have you, and great. Thanks for bringing all your thoughts on so many diverse topics.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
At noon for lunch.
Yeah, we're on at noon at lunch break, so we'll see you in the future.
Sweet.
Okay.